No excuses, no regrets.
CAGR, that stands for Compounded Annual Growth Rate, and sometimes that's referred to as CAGR. And what is that in commercial real estate? It is the growth rate on average between the beginning and the end over a period of time. For example, what you would need would be that, let's say your rental rate was $30 a square foot in the beginning, and then 10 years, and then it grows, let's say 3% a year over 10 years. The end would be some much larger number, maybe 40 a square foot, I'm not too sure. And then the amount of time would be 10 years. And if you were to run that calculation, you would get the CAGR over that. And it doesn't really measure the stuff in between. So that's a big difference between some of the other formulas. It just measures the beginning, the end, and the amount of time in between. And so why is that important, or how is that used in the commercial real estate industry? It just gives people an idea, or investors or asset managers an idea of what's like a very simplistic growth rate from start to finish without looking at the noise in between. And the noise in between is important because a lot of it is like how much money you invested, and then there could be spikes and dips and things like that. But it's a quick ratio that just helps you out in doing a quick evaluation. I see it a lot in investment sales offering memorandums, where you might see that like an investment sales broker is saying, hey, this shopping center has a really good CAGR. It's about 4% or 5% or something like that, which means on average it's growing by 4% per year, which is much higher than inflation, for example. If you have a lease that's 3% annual increases over that 10-year time period, and I did the calculation earlier, using the formula, your CAGR would be about 2.75%. However, if you were to do a lease that was flat for 5 years, 15% increase, and then flat for 5 years again, then your formula using the CAGR would be about 1.41%. So you can really see the difference between 15% every 5 years versus 3% per year. I often see when I'm looking at an offering memorandum that the investment sales broker is advertising, hey, there's a CAGR of 4% for 10 years, for example, meaning that the compounded annual growth rate for 10 years is 4%, which is very strong. Oftentimes I'm seeing the number somewhere between 1% to 5 or 6% on the very high end. A lot of the times when we're looking at properties to buy, we're seeing a CAGR of 2 to 3%, and we're comfortable with that. So if you're selling a shopping center and your CAGR is 2 to 3%, send it to us. We might take a run at it. So a higher compounded annual growth rate is better if you are trying to buy a shopping center and increase the value of it, meaning, or I guess a projected higher CAGR. And so that is why a lot of the asset managers and the landlords push the leasing associates to just build in higher annual increases as opposed to flat and then like 10% bump in year 5 or something like that, because they want to be able to show blended across their rent roll a higher CAGR number percentage. And that's CAGR. It works a little different than NPV and IRR. Like IRR, oftentimes you're striving for a number that's north of 10%, and then NPV it's actually not even a percent, it's a dollar amount. So those work a little bit different, and they have a little bit different functionality. So that's your lesson on CAGR. HVAC, that stands for heating, air conditioning, and ventilation. And so that is basically your air conditioning for the space. And in retail shopping centers, they're typically on the roof. I have seen them in the back on the floor or on the ground of a shopping center before. and they are always measured in terms of tonnage, meaning that if you have a 1,000 square foot space, it's very common that that's serviced by a 3-ton unit. For dry retail, oftentimes the ratio of amount of tons that you need per square footage is something like, for every 300 or 400 square feet, you need 1 ton of HVAC. However, if you have like a restaurant, or maybe even a gym or something that produces a lot of heat inside, you might need to have, or there's a lot more people, you might need to have more tonnage for the same amount of square footage. So for example, for restaurants, it may be 150 square feet per ton, or yeah, something like that. As far as the cost, that's a fairly big ticket item. As of today, which is summer 2025, I'm hearing something on the magnitude of like $3,000 per ton installed. And when you're looking at HVAC, you want to, and you're trying to price it out, and if it's going on the roof, just know that they have to have a crane. They crane it up onto the roof. It has to have like a pad, an HVAC pad, for it to go on top of. And then addition to that, usually not priced in that $3,000 a ton, is like HVAC distribution. That's like the duct work within the space itself, and then the vents and all that stuff. But that gets pretty technical, but that's HVAC, and it's a part of our retail leasing. REA, that stands for Reciprocal Easement Agreement, and it sometimes is referred to as a declaration, or it is referred to as ECR. And essentially what it is it's a recorded document that runs with the land that governs how, if multiple properties are adjacent to each other but are essentially the same project. For example, if you have a Walmart supercenter where Walmart owns their own parcel of land and building, and then you're adjacent to it, so you own a 50,000 square foot shopping center. By the way, we own a couple of those in Florida. And then let's say there's a few out parcels in front, but the out parcels are all owned by separate entities, different people, actually, not even entities, just different owners. You'll have, let's say, 5 landlords or 5 property owners that are the same, that part of the same project. It's almost like an HOA or a condo association. And so there needs to be rules where, hey, there's one entryway into the project. It might be on Walmart's land, it might be on the Shadow Shopping Center's land, our land. It might be, on one of the out parcels' lands. And so how is that access point shared? Can the Walmart shoppers park on any of the parking spaces? Does all of the parcels need to have 4 per 1,000 or up to code parking ratios? And also very important for leasing would be that, is there any use restrictions that run with the land? Because I think that a lot of leasing people, when they're looking to see if they can lease to a certain type of use in a vacancy, they know to go to the use restrictions for all the other tenants, or maybe the anchor tenants or something like that. But there's also, could be, if your property has a REA in place, other use restrictions, or other, not even just use restrictions, but just restrictions on the land that run with the land. So that's all publicly recorded, and it's called an REA agreement. And you can change those. You can, the same way that you would go to an anchor to see if you can amend it. But in the case of the REA, you likely, it's really spelled out within the document itself, but likely you'll have to get everyone on board and sign off on any changes. Some stuff that's not really leasing but more development is the cross easements also with utilities. So there might be utility lines that run through multiple properties in the same project, and and so that's, you know, the access to maintain those lines, how that works and things like that. Also in an REA agreement, very famously would be one that governs regional malls, like enclosed malls, where Sears and JCPenney and Macy's, and then the rest of the mall, they're all tied together by some sort of declaration or some sort of recorded document. There's language in there that might say, hey, you know, it has to be a certain type of look or a certain type of use for the property for forever, and it won't change unless everyone signs off on it. And so that's been like a point of contention between the mall owner and maybe Sears or maybe Macy's, where they want to keep it, you know, very retail, where the mall owner wants to maybe do a mixed use or something. Anyways, that's your explanation of REA. The REA also manages the expenses of the common areas that are shared. So there might be some shared maintenance agreement or something like that, where one of the properties of the project maintains the vast majority of the common areas, and then there could be some expense sharing details in there. For example, every property owner in that project pays their proportionate share of parking lot maintenance, for example, and that's an important part of it as well. ROFO and ROFR stands for right of first offer and right of first refusal. And I think that you probably hear ROFR more often, right of first refusal. And the way that works is that that's often put in many retail leases, where maybe there's an adjacent space that's currently occupied, like a tenant takes a space, and then there's an adjacent space that is currently occupied, but that one tenant that took the space might want to eventually expand into, and so they put in something called a ROFR, or the right of first refusal. And what it might say is, if this space ever becomes available, before you lease it out to somebody else, you have to give us the right to make, to say, no, I don't want it. Or I guess the right of first offer is you have to give us the first right to try to lease it before you give anyone else a chance to lease it. Also, where you see this come in very often is Publix actually has a right of first refusal to buy the shopping centers that they're in. So, meaning that if there's a investor that owns a Publix anchored shopping center, that when they go and try to sell the property, Publix has a chance to try to beat the highest offer, and they have to, where the landlord, or not the landlord, the property owner can say, okay, Publix, for you to buy it, it has to be this price, and you get the right to a first refusal. You can tell me no, or you can tell me yes. And so that's probably one of the more common cases of using a ROFR nowadays, especially in the capital markets. But in leasing, it could be for adjacent space, or something like that. Thanks for listening. This is all part of my answer key series that answers the questions that are posed in the Retail Leasing Associate Proficiency Test. And you can find that on my LinkedIn. This is Hue Chen. And if you just Google Hue Chen CRE, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on YouTube, I'm actually on Reddit now. But I appreciate you listening in. I'm going to be doing these videos answering all of the questions, and I actually just did a calculation. It's probably going to be closer to 30 videos in total. So there's going to be a lot of great content. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, all of that. Appreciate your attention to this.
Lights up in Vegas, we're on our